Hello everyone, welcome to HIM 216. This is a continuation of the lectures for Chapter 8. This is Lecture 3. It will be a short lecture. We're on page 146 in your textbook, and I'm going to go over this operative report with you. The next lectures will be covering the groups of root operations. So you'll have one more lecture that I will cover for this week, and then the remainder of the lectures will be due next week. So that's 4 lectures for this week in addition to your assignments. If you look on page 146, we have an example of an operative report. And your textbook tells you that you really can't code just from the pre and the post-operative diagnosis. So if we look at this operative report, we can see that this patient had a left hip uncemented hemiarthroplasty, and it gives us the indication for the procedure: a 92-year-old who had a fracture of her left femoral neck. So that is going to be the principal diagnosis for this procedure. And the pre-op diagnosis and the post-op diagnosis are the same. The fracture of the femoral neck. It tells us that she had general endotracheal anesthesia, and the specimen that went to pathology was the femoral neck. So again, we know that the femur is the body part that the procedure was performed on. And we can see that they used a device. It was an uncemented hip replacement. So we know that we're going to be using a root operation that always involves a device. And in your book, if you turn to page 99, there kind of in the middle of the page, you can see root operations that always involve a device. And when we look at this and we look down at our options, if we look at replacement, we can see that this is a material that physically takes the place and function of all or a portion of a body part. And the example they have here is a knee replacement. So you could assume that any joint replacement falls into the root operation of replacement. And that's what we're going to be looking at. Now, this is a replacement of the head of the femur. This is a hip replacement. In the index, I'm going to show you that if I go look at if I go to hip, well, just a second. If I go to hip replacement, it says partial or total, see replacement lower joint, and it sends me to the table of 0SR. So I'm going to look up this root operation, and when I look this up, I need to remember to go to joint. If I look at femur, you can see that I have femoral shaft, I have upper femur, I have lower femur, but that is not actually what we're replacing here. We are replacing a joint. So when we're talking about the head of the femur, we're talking about a joint. So if I go to replacement joint and then hip, you can see that I have left and right. And then there's the acetabular surface and the femoral surface. And for us, we're doing the femoral surface. And this was the left. So it sends us to the table OSR. And then if we click on this, it pops in femoral surface left. So that gives me my to my body system, which is lower joint, and my root operation, which is replacement. Now, uncemented is a qualifier. So do you see, come all the way over here to the 7th character? We know it was uncemented. So let's go ahead and select uncemented. That kind of limits our device choices. Do you see? And you see that the approach is open. That popped in. So what we have left to determine here is what the device is. So this tells us that the incision, it's highlighted in yellow, was carried down to the posterior hip through the gluteus maximus and the posterior capsule of the hip. So that definitely, clearly, this is an open approach. And they did the replacement. And our device options here are synthetic substitutes, either metal or ceramic or just synthetic substitute. This operative report doesn't tell us whether or not this was metal or ceramic. Anytime a replacement or a device is placed into a patient, there's always additional information in that medical record, more specific information about that device. For our purposes, we don't know whether it was metal or ceramic, so we're going to choose synthetic substitute. And so our code for this hip replacement is 0SRS0JA. So if you can just break things down, don't get flustered, break things down. It's not really that difficult to apply most of these codes. And so as we're looking at this coding, we don't code the fact that this incision was closed. All we're doing is coding the hip replacement. And so what PCS guideline concerning devices tells us that we are not going to be coding any of the sutures or any post-op wounds or drains, and why don't we code them? So there's a specific guideline for that related to devices, and I want you to tell me what that guideline is. And that will conclude this lecture.